Welcome. I'm John, the Carnivore teacher, and today I am honored to welcome a man who is challenging and changing the way the world thinks about food. Dr. Anthony Chaffee is a medical doctor, neurosurgical registrar, former professional rugby player, and one of the most outspoken voices in the nutritional space. For years, he has been educating audiences worldwide on the science behind an animal-based diet, dismantling mainstream nutrition myths, and exposing the hidden dangers in the foods we've been told are healthy. He's known for his bold, evidence-based claim that plants are not the safe, benevolent foods we think they are. In fact, he says they've been trying to kill us all along. Today, we're going to dig into exactly what he means by that, how plant toxins work, and why he believes the carnivore diet is the optimal human diet for health, longevity, and disease prevention. So buckle up, people. This is going to be an eye-opening conversation that might just make you rethink your next salad. Dr. Anthony Chaffee, welcome to the interview.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. So, number one, let's get right into it. The big claim. You have famously said plants are trying to kill us. That's a provocative statement. Can you explain exactly what you mean and the science behind it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really is a quote from my professor of cancer biology when I was going to the University of Washington in Seattle. And so he actually was the first person to sort of break through with us, where he had already taken botany and biology. I understood about plant toxins, how they have about 1 million different defensive chemicals, anti-nutrients, toxins, hormonal disruptors, so many other sorts of means of defenses to stop animals and insects from eating them, because they're alive and they like to stay alive. So all living things have defenses, and their defenses are largely chemical in nature. And so this was put into the in perspective of the foods that we eat, because you learn about how toxic all these plants are, but of course that doesn't apply to the plants we eat. Those are edible plants, and these non-edible plants, those are the ones with poisons in it. In fact, they all have poisons in it. It's just that we have more or less defenses towards certain toxins in certain plants, so that we can eat them more or less safely. But even then, most of these plants can be quite harmful if not treated properly. So there are a lot of plants that we use and we call edible that are not edible in their natural form. They have to be treated. They have to be even soaked and boiled, cooked, or treated chemically with lye or sodium hydroxide, ash, clay, different sorts of things, fermentation, all of these different traditional ways of preparing plants. These are all for a very good reason, because this lowers the toxic load and increases the bioavailability. So when you throw all that away and just go to like a raw food, sort of vegan approach, you can actually get hit with the full brunt of these toxins, and you can get quite sick from that, and that's not good. So our professor made this point to us, and we were very taken aback by that. But he was telling us that Brussels sprouts had 136 identified carcinogens. This is back in early 2000s. Mushrooms had over 100, and spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, all the different fruits and vegetables that we would eat on a regular basis had dozens, if not over 100 known carcinogens, and that they were quite abundant. That there was work going back to, well, a lot of work, but one was from Professor Bruce Ames from University of California, Berkeley, in the late 80s, early 90s, where he showed that, well, they were talking about getting rid of all these pesticides, and he sort of pointed out that we've been using these pesticides for decades without any sort of problem. So the new rise in health issues in the 1980s really shouldn't be caused by the pesticides, because those had already been in practice. And so he did some studies and actually found that the natural occurring toxins in those so-called edible farm products were far and away more toxic than the pesticides that they were studying at the time. In this particular study, alar, which they spread on apples and other sorts of things. And they found that the naturally occurring toxins were 10,000 times more abundant by weight than the pesticides we were spraying on them, and that they were hundreds of times more likely to cause cancer in lab rats. So we were very taken aback by this. We were very blown away. And I remember thinking, I was like, he must be joking. There's something else going on here. And I remember thinking, like, well, vegetables are still good for you though, right? Even, even with all that. And he just sort of took a look at us and he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. And it just really, really hammered that home for me. And I'm like, yep, okay, no more plants. And that was my litmus test, was if it had a plant, I wasn't going to eat it. So I sort of naturally defaulted into eggs and meat. Since then, I've looked into this much more deeply and found that he was extremely ahead of his time. And he was very, very well ahead of his time and behind his time, because 100 years ago we knew this. You read nutritionists such as Adele Davis, who's a very famous nutritionist. She said you never eat spinach raw. You only poach it in milk. You have creamed spinach, spanakopita with feta cheese and things like that, because they have these toxic oxalates in there that are very harmful to your health. And so if you poach them or cook them with dairy, the calcium in there draws out those oxalates and neutralizes them so that you can eat this stuff more safely. So we actually understood about plant toxins much more previously. I mean, for thousands of years, this was a very important part of nutrition, was understanding which plants were harmful and how to lower that harm. So when I started looking into this more and more, I found just more and more evidence of this. I mean, there's botanists and biologists from Cambridge, from Texas, from all over the world that have lectures up on, there's on the Cambridge University YouTube channel, actually, called Cambridge Ideas. There's a lecture there or a video from Professor John Parker, who's a professor of botany. He's head of their botanical gardens there at Cambridge, or at least he was, and this was done back in 2011, I think. But the title of his video is just called "Don't Eat the Plants," and he's just talking about all these plant toxins, how harmful they are to human health, and that they're a really bad idea to eat. And he even concludes at the end, like, okay, so what do you eat? Well, if you want to eat real food without all these spines and hairs and toxins and all these other sorts of things, become a carnivore. Just eat meat. That was his conclusion, and that was long before we had the carnivore movement that we have now. Mm-hmm. So, this is not a fringe opinion. This is mainstream biological and botanical sciences, and that's what I've been trying to just bring to bear, because it's been so overshadowed by the very non-scientific nutritional epidemiology, mostly funded by the food and drug companies like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Nestle, etc. Coca-Cola alone in 2015 spent $119 million
wow.
on nutritional research. So they spend far more than any other sector, them as a whole, the processed food industry. And you can just guess at what the conclusions are. Coca-Cola had a study that said, oh, you give Coca-Cola to mice and they lose weight. Oh, look at that. Coca-Cola is a diet drink. It's like, give me a break. This is fraud. It's just marketing.
Yeah.
They have frequency questionnaires where they ask somebody to try to remember what they've eaten in the last 4 years, and as if that could ever be accurate, and then say that, well, pizza can sometimes have meat as a topping. You get a Big Mac meal with the fries and the drink. Well, that has a little sliver of a meat patty in it. So all that's meat. Pizza's meat, fast food's meat, anything that has an ingredient that's meat, we're just going to call that meat. And people who eat less meat, they seem to be healthier, in this fake study that, that cannot be accurate, because you're asking people to remember every meal they've had for the course of years. And it's completely biased. And these things are largely funded by the processed food industries and or different sorts of ideological groups that push a more plant-based diet, either for commercial gain or just because of their own ideological bent. You have other researchers that are vegan activists, self-described vegan activists, like Dr. Gardner from Stanford, and so who has described himself, as a big proponent of veganism, regardless of nutritional value. So that's what you have to contend with. This is the hard science. Botany is a hard science. Biology is a hard science. Nutritional epidemiology is junk. It's junk science. You can publish this stuff, but it's garbage. It is fraught with confounding factors and personal biases. You look at McMaster, who published a pure study, same methodology, food frequency questionnaires, but they didn't do it in a biased way that intentionally muddied the data that they collected. And so they actually found the exact opposite of what people at Harvard, like Walter Willett with the nurses studies, have put forward, saying, no, you need to stop eating meat and all that sort of stuff. First year of medical school, really quickly, we went through the nurses studies that uses these food frequency questionnaires. One of the first things to use that, Professor Willett sort of popularized that methodology of doing nutritional studies. And we were told straight away that, you know, that sort of epidemiology it can only generate a hypothesis saying, hey, look at this, I'm seeing this trend. Okay, let's test it. Let's see if there's actually something there. And whenever you tested any of their suppositions from the nurses study that they said, oh, look, this is what we found, whenever they were tested experimentally, they came up as not being accurate. And so it's nonsense. And so, you know, this is being pushed for a political agenda, for a financial agenda, and ideological agenda. But it's not the hard science. The hard science is that plants are living organisms. They do not want you to eat them, and they absolutely have defenses. And you can take that for granted at your own risk.
Wow. Absolutely. I totally agree with you 100%, as you've taught me and many other people have taught me. Now, the people that I'm trying to convince, some of the people that ask me questions, all right, you mentioned oxalates. All right. I had a kidney stone. I've been through that. That's when the attention, that's when it slapped me in the face. You know, what are you eating that caused this? And sometimes people don't think about going carnivore until they have a tragic event that happens to them. So can you tell my audience, other than oxalates, what are some of the other toxins that we're talking about, like lectins and phytates and stuff?
Well, I mean, there are thousands, tens of thousands, actually close to 1 million different defensive chemicals that plants make, that we have you know, categorized and classified and even named, right? So there's many of these things, and certain categories, right? So it'd be like lectins you mentioned there. There are many different kinds of lectins, thousands, tens of thousands of the different kinds of lectins. So gluten, people talk about that. There's wheat germ agglutinin. That's a lectin. All lectins can agglutinate. So that's why it's called wheat germ agglutinin, which means it makes things stick together. So you have these sort of, you have these villi in your intestines, and have these microvilli, little finger-like projections that come off of that. That it massively increases the receptor area and the absorptive surface area of your gut. Gluten, wheat germ agglutinin, agglutinates that. So these little finger-like projections stick together. And you see people with celiac in particular, they can have these things stuck together, but then they get damaged and they actually go away and they get destroyed, right? But anybody will have that stickiness. It'll all stick together. It's hemagglutinin that will get into your bloodstream and stick your red blood cells together and start making them sticky, tacky, and increase your risk of clotting. So there's many of these things. Your body does react to them and elicit an immuno response to them, because they are damaging your normal body physiology and anatomy. And so your body does react to them. And so they can elicit a large inflammatory response. Lectins, for example, are strongly implicated in causing autoimmunity. And this has been argued in published literature and peer-reviewed literature since the earliest I found was 1991. It was a Dr. Fried who published a paper looking at this and arguing that these autoimmune diseases that we call autoimmune diseases, that he said that your body attacking itself actually has never been proven, and that's true. It's just that, and for your body to attack itself without any intermediary, it would have to satisfy certain conditions which are not satisfied. But he said that the known effects of lectins in your bodies, these plant lectins, because there are other lectins too, but they're specifically plant lectins, that those are known to satisfy all of those preconditions. Right. It's just that we looked at these things as we put an autoimmune stamp on it, and now we just look at from this frame of autoimmune. This is autoimmune. We need to treat it as autoimmune. What if it's not autoimmune? That's outside the box thinking. Okay, the box is autoimmune. There's nothing else it can be. Well, what if it is? What if it is something else? Right. And so that's what Dr. Fried was arguing. And that's certainly what I've seen. When you remove lectins, you remove these plant foods from people's diets, autoimmunity goes away.
Hmm.
dramatically. And we know this with, I mean, this is even in the literature with celiac. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease towards gluten, wheat germ agglutinin, right? So, but it's called a gluten mediated autoimmune disease, right? Well, if it's mediated by something else, probably not an autoimmune disease, right? So what happens is you get this wheat germ agglutinin, it agglutinates your gut, and your body reacts to this and responds to this and say, hey, get the hell out of there. So because the gluten is stuck to your cells and your body's attacking that gluten that are stuck to your cells get damaged. And so you start destroying your gut lining. But the important part there is that when you stop eating gluten, on biopsy, you can see that the gut heals completely within 4 to 6 weeks, even though the antibodies stay elevated for up to 3 years.
Wow.
Right. So those are not autoantibodies. Those are not attacking your body because your body's still there.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't change. So gluten's not there anymore. And so over time saying, okay, we're not seeing this threat anymore. We're going to start creeping down. But then you eat gluten again, bam, they shoot right back up because that's what they're responding to. And that's how your body works. Excuse me. So that's what I see in all autoimmune conditions, especially the ones that we can measure their antibodies, such as Hashimoto's. When I have over 100 patients with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the leading cause of hypothyroidism. It used to be iodine deficiency. Now it's Hashimoto's. So in those patients, when they're able to stick to a very strict carnivore diet, especially just beef, lamb, and water, because that ruminant digestion can ferment and break down these toxins. Again, fermentation, that's a good way of getting rid of these plant toxins, opening up bioavailability of these nutrients, that they are able to break down a lot of these toxins so they don't filter through. Whereas a pig or a chicken or a fish, they're monogastrics, they don't ferment their food before they absorb it. And so if they're being fed plants that they're not designed to eat either, more of these toxins can get in their body, right? And they'll filter out a lot of those things with their liver, etc. But some of it can slip through, and that can be a problem for some people that are very sensitive to these substances, especially. So when they're able to do that, invariably, I see them massively improve their condition. So these sorts of conditions that we call autoimmunity, which I argue are not autoimmune. I have a lecture online. It's called Rethinking Autoimmune Diseases or Autoimmunity or whatever. And I sort of make all these arguments, but whatever we want to call it, Hashimoto's, you have the inflammatory attack that's damaging your thyroid right now, and you need to stop that. But also that has damaged your thyroid to the point that it's non-functional, or at least less functional. And so those are two different things. And so that's why people get put on thyroid medication, but then they don't really have anything to do for the damage that's being done. They basically just say, eventually it's going to die. Your thyroid's going to be destroyed, and you're going to have to be on medication the rest of your life. And we'll have to surgically remove your thyroid because it's a cancer risk at that point when it gets completely dysfunctional. So when you put people on a carnivore diet, it stops the damage, even though the antibodies can stay elevated. But the thyroid is much slower to recover than your gut lining. And so it can take months to a year or two before you can actually get a significant level of healing or complete healing. And so during that time, you might still need thyroid medication. Certainly you wouldn't come off of these things without doctor supervision. But I often see them needing less and less and less medication as long as they're strict. And over time, their thyroid antibodies coming down, the TPO and TG antibodies are coming down for Hashimoto's. They just come steadily down. But it's like the celiac, where it takes a couple of years sometimes, depending on how elevated they are. But they do come down. I've seen them drop hundreds and hundreds of points after people have been very strict lion diet, beef, lamb, and water for 8 months or so. It's dropping hundreds of points down to very, very low levels. And so, but depending on how high you are, it could take longer than that. But either way, if this theory that I have is true, and Dr. Fried shared with me is true, that it's actually the lectins causing the problem and the damage, and your body's attacking those lectins, then either way, you can have elevated antibodies, but they're not damaging yourself. And hopefully they're not. And that's what we see. We see their thyroids improving as their antibodies are coming down, but they don't have to get to zero before their their body starts improving. But then they eat anything else, those antibodies are there waiting vigil. And as soon as they come in, bam, you have this big reaction, you get a lot of damage. So lectins are one of them. Lectins can do all sorts of things in your body. They can mimic different hormones in your body, like insulin. So lectins can bind to
Really?
insulin.
Oh,
Yeah, they can bind
I
to
didn't know
insulin
that.
receptors. Yeah, 5 times more tightly than insulin can.
Wow.
And so even when people are ketogenic, but they're eating, these lectin-containing vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, they can actually get this big insulin response, even though their insulin is completely normal. So it's harder for them to lose weight. And there have been studies that have shown, like, ketogenic diets, you lose a significant amount of weight, but then you have a ketogenic diet that removes lectins, and they lose even more. And this is why a lot of people from the ketogenic way of eating have come to carnivore, which is a ketogenic diet,
Right.
but it's just a sort of a more, another step down that path. That they end up, maybe hit a stall. They massive improvements, health is getting so much better, but they sort of hit a stall. They can't quite get rid of that last little bit of weight and improve their health in certain ways. They get rid of the plants and just, that's just the floodgates open on their health improvements and weight loss. So that's another thing they can do. They can also, lectins also block a hormone called leptin, which is our satiety hormone that can make you feel like you're starving, and it slows down if your brain can't see your leptin, your brain basically thinks you're starving to death,
Right.
because leptin comes from your fat tissue. And so if your brain thinks you're starving to death, it's going to tamp down your metabolism so that you can't really use much of your body fat. And it's going to really up your hunger signals. And so it causes you to overeat, and what you do overeat causes you to store that predominantly, not use it, which is important, because this can make you gain more weight or make it difficult to lose weight. And I do see people that have difficulty even on carnivore losing weight. 100% of them have high leptin. And so going on these carnivore diet can help lower that leptin. So very briefly for listeners, the 6 main things that can block leptin are insulin blocks leptin, fructose independently blocks leptin, alcohol blocks leptin, lectins block leptin, and then stress. So cortisol. Cortisol will block leptin. So high stress or poor sleep, if you get average 5 hours of sleep a night or less for 7 nights in a row, it can actually give you prediabetes from the amount of cortisol that goes up. And so it takes a full 7 days in a row of 7 to 8 hours of sleep to undo that. So it has a significant impact on you. And then, funny enough, blue lights. So specific frequencies of blue lights, not coming with the rest of the frequency of the light coming from the sun, like coming from your screens, coming from LED lights, fluorescence, those sorts of things, that can actually block leptin at the level of the hypothalamus. So all of these things need to be optimized in order to get your leptin down. And it can take months and months and months for your leptin to come down, but eventually it will, and weight will just shed off. Some people seem to be able to lose weight even with elevated leptin. Don't know why, but 100% of people that can't lose weight or lose weight very slowly, sort of more of a slow burn, 100% of them I've seen have high leptin. So that's something that if you're having trouble and you check your leptin and it's elevated, it should be under 5 for men and women, then you're just in that category. There's just going to be a bit of a slower burn, but eventually that will come down enough and it will just start streaming off you. So there are many other things as well. I mean, there's cyanogenic glycosides that when you chew them, this is why it's a very clear defense, because when you chew these things, it releases 2 chemicals that form hydrogen cyanide, which is toxic to all life, all known life. And so that is a kill switch. So the plant's saying, okay, you're eating me, you're crushing me up, you're chewing me, I'm going to kill you too. I'm going to dump out all this cyanide to try to hurt you. And so things have more or less of this, about 3,500 different plants that we know of that have cyanogenic glycosides to varying degrees. But things like cassava, there's sweet cassava, bitter cassava, and bitter cassava has so much cyanide that it will kill you and kill an adult. But this is the main staple of 750 million people in the tropics. That's their number 1 calorie source, right? It's the number 3 overall calorie source in all of the tropics. So it's a really important staple diet. This is something that the very poor people are sort of forced to eat because it's available, it's cheap, but it has to be processed properly to lower that toxic load. And then there's sweet cassava that doesn't have nearly as much cyanide, so it's edible and you can eat it as it is, but there is cyanide in it. And the bitter cassava, you don't get rid of all the cyanide in. It only lowers it significantly. But low-grade exposure to cyanide over time can cause very serious organ dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction. It blocks iodine from coming in your thyroid. So it's a goitrogen. There's an entire category of plant toxins called goitrogens that stuff up the functionality of your thyroid, which is another reason when people go carnivore, their thyroids improve because you get rid of all these goitrogens. Cyanide these cyanogenic glycosides are goitrogens as well, but they also damage the electron transport chain in your mitochondria globally, so they can damage all of your tissue.
Wow.
And especially sensitive to this is your neurological system. So you get neurological damage as well as thyroid damage and multi-organ damage. And eventually you can die if you completely prevent your cells from making enough ATP. So almonds, sweet almonds and bitter almonds, as little as 40 or 50 sweet almonds a day can be enough of a dose that eaten chronically can give you those long-term chronic deleterious health effects in an adult. And we're giving this stuff to children regularly. I remember my brother's doctor in the 90s said, one thing to do to be on top, or early 2000s, be on top of your cholesterol is eat almonds and other nuts, because they have these phytosterols, which are plants' version of cholesterol. And our body can't use that properly, but it signals our liver to make less cholesterol. So this lowers your cholesterol. So he was told to eat 35 almonds a day ongoing, and that would keep his cholesterol down. Okay. So that's right at that border of actually giving long-term serious harm from it. No, and this is well documented by CDC, WHO, FDA, etc. They really don't consider there's any real safe level of cyanide to consume, and yet we don't put labels on these things because it's natural cyanide. So it's fine if it's natural cyanide. If it was industrial included or got in there somehow, we have to say, warning, this contains even trace amounts of cyanide. But because it's natural, you don't have to do that. And could you imagine, like, no one would ever buy these things, if it said, like, cassava chips. There's like packets of chips with a cassava in it, right? Or veggie chips, tapioca, that comes from cassava as well. So tapioca pudding, tapioca flour, those sorts of things. So it has a lot of these cyanogenic glycosides. And just almonds as well. Can you imagine, like, if we put that, just say, hey, warning, this has even a low amount of cyanide, don't have more than this many ounces per day ongoing. People are just going to get out and be like, how about I have none of that ever?
Right.
But that is what they should be doing, because it is dangerous. Now, having a few almonds, is that going to kill you? No. But having a handful of almonds every day ongoing can absolutely build up harm. And that's a whole
almond flour. A lot of people make
almond flour,
an enormous amount of almond flour to make the keto treats that they eat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's the thing, is that's the entire point of this, is that it's like, not plants are trying to kill you in the sense that they're just going to, stick a gun to your head and you're just dead that second if you eat them. Now, most of the 400,000 plant species that we know of in the world will cause an acute reaction that will make you extremely sick or even kill you with just a very small amount.
Right.
So North American water hemlock, that's the most poisonous plant in North America. Wow. And half a leaf can kill an adult, right? Blocks the GABA receptors in the brain, which are the sort of the calming receptors in the brain. And so your brain gets overexcited and you get seizures. And so you die of intractable seizures within 2 minutes, and you can't stop them. Right. And not even that you'd have a chance to being out in the woods or something like that, 1 to 2 minutes, you're dead. Right. So, these things are highly toxic. Most plants on Earth will kill most animals, even herbivores that exclusively eat plants. They eat very specific plants because they have the defenses towards those plants, but other plants will kill them. And we even have this in these names for these diseases in veterinary medicine, because livestock cost money. Humans are basically, we're valuable when we're sick because we have to go pay for a treatment. Cows are valuable when they're healthy and putting on weight. And so when they start getting sick, losing weight and dying, okay, people are losing money here. So like, okay, what the hell is going on? So they actually figured out that there are a number of these diseases like big tongue, big head, limp neck, crazy cow syndrome. Those are names for diseases that have now been shown to be, a long time ago, shown to be toxicities. Big head, that's when the face gets all lumpy and weird. That's from oxalate poisoning, because oxalates strip out calcium from the blood. You have to demineralize your bones because if your calcium level in your blood goes too low, your heart stops. And so you have to sacrifice your bones for your heart, obviously. And so when you sort of get away from that, all of a sudden it starts remineralizing and regrowing, and you start getting this big, lumpy, big head sort of pattern to it, right? So that's from chronic exposure to oxalates, right?
Hmm.
So we know that all these things actually come from these herbivores eating plants that they're not designed for and getting sick from that. And then we even have nutritional deficiencies in animals that we know about too, because that's very important. If they're not gaining weight, if they're getting sick because of some nutritional deficiency, like they need to know about it so they can put that in the feed. They can get that, if it's not in the soil, they can get mineral licks and so on. This is why you have things like selenium, because selenium is a trace mineral. It's either in the soil or it's not. And so if you're in a sort of a deficient area, you will have to put out selenium licks, because cows can get muscular dystrophy from low selenium. So we call it nutritional muscular dystrophy. People can look that up. So that comes from a selenium deficiency in cows, and they display muscular dystrophy. There's multiple kinds of muscular dystrophies in humans. This is very similar to those. But that's a cause. So how many problems in humans are either from eating something that's toxic to us and harms us, or like big head, limp neck, crazy cow syndrome, or a nutritional deficiency like nutritional muscular dystrophy? We're not getting enough selenium. No one even knows about selenium. No one ever checks your selenium. I check people's selenium. It's low unless they're on a carnivore diet, right? So, how many of these diseases, so-called diseases, are actually nutritional deficiencies or toxicities from plant? And that's the argument that I'm making, is that over time, it's not that these things are just killing you on the spot, but over time they're building up harm, just like the cyanogenic glycosides. And we know this. We know that X amount long-term will cause these issues, right? And when you're talking about nearly 1 billion people relying on cassava with cyanogenic glycosides as their main calorie source, that is a much bigger issue than people realize, right? Other things that can be toxic, but also be anti-nutrient. So another way that plants defend themselves is by being less nutritious. So they can bind up their nutrients. And yes, there are good things in plants to get, but you may not be able to access them because they're bound up in chemical bonds that we don't have the enzymes to break down, which is proof positive that we are not biologically adapted to or supposed to eat those things. And that's why we have to expose them to different chemicals. We have to ferment them. We have to do these other things to break these chemical bonds and release these nutrients, make them more bioavailable. Another one is they can make other things less nutritious as well. Even if you're eating your normal diet, they can have things like phytic acid, oxalates, as we mentioned, can bind to calcium, iron, magnesium, other sorts of things. Saponins that can disrupt your body's enzymes that can break down these nutrients as well. Phytic acid can bind irreversibly to various minerals and nutrients. One argument that I heard, wasn't a great argument, from a vegan, was that yes, phytic acid can bind to these things and we don't have the enzymes for it, but our gut microbiome does have the enzymes, or the certain microbes can have these enzymes to break that down. And so that's fine. But this is someone that is unfamiliar with the digestive idiosyncrasies of our gut, because our microbiome is in our colon, and you may or may not have that bacteria. So you may not have the right bacteria to break that down. But whether you did or not, it doesn't matter, because you don't absorb those nutrients in your colon. You absorb those in your small intestine. Now you're past that. So unless you went and ate your feces, which gorillas have to do,
Right.
by the way,
Yeah.
right? Then you're not getting those nutrients because you don't absorb it. So it doesn't matter what happens in your colon. What matters is before that, and we don't have the enzymes to break down that phytic acid complex with these nutrients. So you have these anti-nutrient effects. You can have protease inhibitors, lipase inhibitors, these sorts of things that stop and prevent our own enzymes from breaking down fats and proteins, etc. Fiber can be an anti-nutrient all on its own, because it can form a sort of a lattice. The soluble fiber and insoluble fiber can form sort of like a gummy sort of matrix that can actually be a physical obstruction to your enzymes getting to the food, so you're breaking down less of it, and then that broken down food blocks that from reaching the lumen of the intestine. So you can, eating fiber, especially a high fiber diet, you can actually reduce your absorption of nutrients, all nutrients, by up to 30%. And so this is why they say, well, eating a high fiber diet can be beneficial for diabetes, because you're blocking out the absorption of 30% of the carbohydrates, and your blood sugar goes down. It's not shocking. That's how a number of the diabetes medications like Acarbose or even metformin to a certain extent. That's how they work. Yeah, okay. They block out. Metformin does more than that, but it also blocks out some of the absorption.
I didn't know that.
B12 as well, but also carbohydrates. But Acarbose specifically blocks out a lot of the absorption, not all of it, but some of the absorption of carbohydrates, and so that's why people get that. But fiber does that as well. So there are many other sorts of things. I mean, they make latex. We make latex gloves, and we use these sorts of things, but these saps they're not just there for fun. Latex is a really sticky, tacky sort of sap that when an animal starts eating, again, when they start chewing it, then it starts forming and leaking out, and acts as like a glue, and it can actually glue the mouth shut of the animals trying to eat it. And now they can't eat. They can't open their mouth, and they die. They starve to death over the coming weeks, which is a really nasty way to go. But that's just a demonstration that the plant is more than happy for you to die if it gets to live, as all life on Earth is. You get too close to a buffalo in Yellowstone Park, it is going to take you out. Right. Not because it's trying to eat you. It's trying to make sure you're not trying to eat it, and it feels threatened. And so it will defend itself. But animals have kinetic defenses. They can run away. They can fight back. They can hide. Plants can't. They're just sitting there. They're stationary. And so they have to have these other defenses. And that's something that people really need to take seriously.
All right. Amazing answers to these questions. I don't know how you get all that out in such a short amount of time, packed with information. I'm so amazed. I have this question I've been waiting to ask you now. We talked about some of the plant toxins. Some argue, all right, I'm sure you've heard this, the dose makes the poison. All right, how do you respond to people who say that plant toxins are harmless in small amounts that we eat? That, we can have a little bit.
Yeah, all 1 million of them? Really? And so that's the thing. If we're saying that the dose makes the poison, yeah, a dose does make the poison. Okay, so what's the dose? You don't get to just say that and then not come up with an answer, right? Because the amount of cyanide, that's a measurable amount that this will cause harm in a long-term period of time, or this acutely toxic, right? And so people have no idea what that number is. And so flaxseed is far higher levels of cyanogenic glycosides than sweet almonds do. And so, even 6 servings, 7 servings can be a very serious a dose of cyanogenic glycosides to an adult, right? And so we're putting just tons, just scoops of flaxseed into smoothies and things like that. There was actually a study that looked at smoothies, the different smoothie bars, and they actually found whole apples, because there's cyanide in apple seeds and things like that. Right? Oh my God! Yeah. So they just put the whole thing in there. Right. It's fine. Instead of coring it out and taking the apple seed out. Right. Because they're just blending it up. I don't care. And they put flaxseed in there and things like that. And they actually found harmful levels of cyanide in a lot of these things. Certainly, if consumed regularly over time, it would absolutely be a dosage that would build up over time. And if you had a number of these things, give me 2 extra flax seeds because they're so good for me, sort of things, you can hurt yourself. If you're giving those to kids that are much more sensitive to this stuff, you can really hurt them. And either way, even if it's not killing you, even if it's not causing an acute reaction, it's still not good for you. It's still causing low grade harm. And so that's not good, especially for a child. The dose does make the poison. The dose is really damn small. And if you are saying that dose makes the poison, you have to then say what that dose is. Right. And so you can't just say dose makes the poison, eat all the plants you want. Okay. Because each individual plant has thousands of these things. Right. Okay. So maybe it's too low for one thing, but maybe it's high enough for another one.
Okay.
And that's the other argument with and how much are you eating? Because no one's telling you to limit it. They're actually saying the more plants you eat, the better. Right. Look at the blue zones. They're herbivores. No, they're not. They're nearly carnivores, actually. Especially in like Sardinia and things like that. But, those have been shown to be fraudulent anyway. The blue zone studies, a professor from Oxford actually showed that a lot of this stuff was pension fraud. People were actually lying about their age to qualify for pensions earlier, And so now they're like, oh, you're 110. Actually, they're 84 now, but
Oh,
they signed up for this thing years ago.
yeah.
And or their grandparents and granduncles and things like that have actually since passed away 10 years ago, but they didn't tell anybody about it, so they can keep collecting their pension check and their Social Security or something like that, right? Or their government sort of pension check. So because a lot of these people were poor, there's in poor areas, and they sort of needed this extra money to survive. So in any case, it's that's been thoroughly argued against. But also they just eat way more meat than that. But so then people just say, eat as much plants as you can. They're all good, blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. You cannot do that. Without telling somebody what the dose is, you have no idea. So certain plants are going to have more or less of certain things. But let's say you're eating a lot of it. Let's say you're eating the same thing every single day. It's going to build up.
Right.
Liam Hemsworth, the actor, Chris Hemsworth's
I'll
brother.
bring them up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he got sucked into this whole vegan nonsense from a nutritionist that they had who pushes that nonsense, and didn't tell him what the dose was. Oh yeah, it's all fine, everything's great. Liam Hemsworth had to go to the hospital with acute oxalate poisoning from drinking spinach smoothies every morning for 3 weeks. He could have died, and he had to get emergency surgery to remove these massive kidney stones. So he got very sick. People have died from acute oxalate poisoning, and if you don't understand that that's a potential, you're really setting yourself up for a problem. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to cut out all plants, but understand which ones are worse than others. Try to do things like cooking them, fermenting them, cooking them in the traditional ways, like creamed spinach, spanakopita, those sorts of things, to lower the toxic load, and then mix them up. Don't eat the same thing every day, so it doesn't give it a chance to build up in your system. Or if you want to feel the best that you possibly can, and avoid that whole garbage in the first place and not have any toxins in your body, just don't eat them. Right. You don't need them. You don't even want them. It's just that, from a health perspective, it's just that, people are used to it, and they want to keep doing that. Okay, fine. But, just understand what they are. The next argument is hormesis. So yes, these things are toxic, but they're actually good toxins. This is good lead, it's like, well, okay, again, like the definition of a hormetic, of something that's hormetic, is that it at past this point, it's toxic, right? Oh, dose makes the poison. Okay, past this point, it's poison. Here, it's not poison, or maybe even beneficial, hormetic. Okay, so what is the dose? You have to answer that. Right. And is this one chemical hormetic at this dose? Okay, so how much oxalates are hormetic? Right? First of all, cyanide is not hormetic. It is toxic all across the board. That's why there's no safe level of ingestion. And yet this is in everything, or in all sorts of things. And we don't label this, even though it's not considered safe to have any level of cyanide consumption, really, and especially for kids. It's very small anyway. And so let's pretend that oxalates are hormetic, which they're not. What would the dosage be? Right? How many leaves would you be able to have before it became toxic? What other things in spinach, because there are thousands of other chemicals in there, what other things in there are hormetic or not hormetic, but toxic at a certain dose? What are their doses? If you stay in the hormetic range with oxalates, are you toxic for another one? Right. Or if you get it, you know what I mean? Or you're in a hormetic. Yeah, exactly. You don't know that. And that's the point, is that it's just this, people just saying, it's hormetic, dose makes the poison. It's a throwaway line that means nothing. It's actually meaningless when you examine it, because the only thing meaningful is to say, what is the dose? And what is the dose of all those chemicals in that plant? And are they hormetic? Not all toxins are going to be hormetic, but are they hormetic or not? What dosage are they hormetic? And are they perfectly hormetically balanced, so that when you're if you eat 5 spinach leaves, are you getting a perfectly hormetic balance of oxalates and phytates and tannins and this is and that and the others? Or are they all over the shop, which they are, right? And again, how many leaves? Can you eat 5 leaves? Can you eat 10? Can you eat 100? Right? You start getting really harmful levels of spinach at about 100 grams. So that's half a cup of cooked spinach. That's not much, right? So, the thing is that you have to know what doses of what. And again, there are thousands of these things. So no one ever answers that.
Right.
So
They
people
don't
say,
know
well,
the answer. I don't think we know
they
the
don't.
answer. Yeah.
No, of course they don't. Well, some things we do, like cyanide, right?
Mhm.
None. None is the safe amount of cyanide to ingest, but there's certain amounts you get past. Okay, so 40 to 50 almonds a day, that will build up harm over time and cause neurological dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction, multi-organ dysfunction, right? So
Mhm.
that's a threshold,
That we know.
and you need to know that, right? And then what else is in there that might be harmful? So anytime someone says that something's hormetic or dose makes a poison, say, okay, great. What's the dose? If they
Right.
can't answer that, don't listen to them.
Absolutely. All right. For someone who's curious about removing plants from their diet, it's the reason we're
Mhm.
here. What's the best way to start, and what should they watch for in their first few weeks?
Well, then, I mean, it depends on where you're at mentally. I mean, if you're like me, just sort of, I know this is toxic. I'm not going to eat anything toxic. No, thank you. And so I just threw everything out,
Jump right
and
in.
you just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. You do that as many times during the day that your body is telling you to do. You have to make sure you're eating enough. You have to eat until it stops tasting good. Literally, you get to a bite that tastes like cardboard. That's when you're done, because your hunger signals are going to be very different. They're much more subtle, and it's very easy to undereat on a carnivore diet. So it's
Yeah.
important that you eat enough. Um, and then it's more about what you don't eat as well. So you need to get enough fat. So 1 to 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. That's
Mhm.
typically around the range that people need, and you just for your own individual self. But then my hard rule for myself and others is that want to do this like I do it is no plants or mushrooms, no sugar or any sweeteners, nothing artificial. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. And so just meat, eggs, fish, chicken, salt, water. That's it.
Mhm.
Right. And you just eat until it stops tasting good. If you are the type of person that you're like, ugh, yeah, dairy is a gray area. Probably try to avoid it at first, especially, something like certainly anything with carbs, take it out. And even others can have casomorphines can actually trigger a hunger response and tell your body to store energy, fat.
Mhm.
So especially if you're trying to lose weight, dairy can be a problem. So if you're going to have a bit of cheese every now and then, have it be a bit of cheese every now and then. Have it as infrequently and as a condiment. So melting some cheese, have a cheesy omelet or slice the cheese on a burger patty or something like that. I wouldn't just eat blocks of cheese or anything like that. Then the other thing is that if you sort of can't get your head around just cutting out everything in a go, and you want to do this in more piecemeal fashion, you need to have a clear plan on when you're going to do this. We just say, oh, I'll just sort of eat a bit more meat and sort of less of other things. Like, that's good. You're moving in the right direction, but you're probably not going to sort of get to where you want to be. So I would definitely cut out sugar, all junk food, day one, whole foods only. Focus on fatty meat. That's the main staple. Cut out carbs, cut out sugar will be the next step. And then have a mark on the calendar on Friday. Carbs and sugar are gone, right?
Yeah.
Next Friday, high oxalate foods are gone. Next
All right.
nightshades, potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, those sorts of things, very high in lectins. I'm going to get those things out and just start cutting these things out. Beans, seams, legumes, nuts, those are very high in lectins. You cut
Right.
those suckers out. And then you just go down the track, however you want to do that. And then on this day, hopefully 4 weeks later, nothing else except meat, egg, salt, and water. That's it. And so if you have that clear timeline of on this day, I'm cutting this out, on this day, I'm cutting the next stuff out, and the whole time you're focusing on eating the meat and eating less and less of the plants, I think you'll do well. But so it depends on your personality type and what you can get your head around. But if you're going to just jump into it, make sure you're eating enough, make sure you're eating the right things. And if you're going to go into it slowly, have a clear and distinct plan on when you're going to get to full carnivore.
Excellent advice. Thank you. All right, I want to be really considerate of your time. Will you participate in a 10-question lightning round real quick?
Sure.
All right, quick fire with Dr. Chaffee. Real quick
Okay.
answers. Number one, what plant food would you never touch again?
No, any grain, seeds, legumes, nuts, anything with carbohydrates as well, but those high oxalate containing things and the nightshades as well.
All right, most toxic plant compound in your opinion?
I mean, of the edible plants,
Mhm.
that would be the thing. Probably the lectins. The lectins are pretty awful. A
Lectins.
lot of those can be denatured with cooking, but cyanide is obviously just
Yeah.
it'll just kill you, But So cyanide would be the worst, definitely, but then lectins would be close to that as well. And those are in the edible ones. Obviously, the non-edible ones, they'll all just kill you, so they're all pretty bad.
All right, number 3, the healthiest food people eat that's actually hurting them.
Oh, what they think is healthy.
That's actually
Um,
hurting them.
yeah, I mean, I'm basically the whole sort of gambit of vegetarian sort of diet approaches. Um, so like oat milk and all these other sorts of things. These are highly processed garbage, I mean, and the highly processed plant-based meats and things like that. I mean, these have been shown, they're just filled with chemicals that you don't want. They're all these plant toxins on top of the chemicals you're adding towards that. Those are pretty harmful, and people think that they're healthy because they're plant-based, but it's definitely nothing could be further from the truth.
All right, one plant toxin that's the most underestimated. Would it be the lectins?
Lectins, definitely, because people just don't realize how many problems that they cause. I mean, as far as causing widespread harm, I think lectins are well up there. Even with the amount of people that eat, cassava, that's going to be significant health impact. But the lectins, no one knows that. I mean, the beans, the seeds, those are probably the healthiest things that people think they're so healthy. They're horrible for you, horrible. Wow. I mean, the WHO even says that as little as 5 red kidney beans have put people in the hospital when undercooked or uncooked. So they're really harmful, and even when they've been denatured to a point and they're not as toxic, as acutely toxic as that, they can still cause harm. And again, autoimmune diseases are on the rise significantly. They're a massive increase in autoimmunity, especially in recent years and decades. And that's because we're going more plant-based, and we're saying, oh, this is so good, raw plants, all that stuff. It's getting worse. And I mean, 60-70% of the people that follow me on social media and YouTube were former vegans, vegetarians, plant-based. And so many of them, yes, they improved their health at first when they got rid of all the junk food and crap, and they felt that, oh yeah, it's getting rid of meat and I feel so much better. Well, no, actually they changed their life dramatically. They stopped drinking, smoking, they started working out, started eating whole foods, they stopped eating junk food, all these sorts of things, massive changes that they made. No soda anymore, all that sort of stuff. So they made a lot of really positive health changes, and one really bad decision that hurt their health, which is getting rid of the meat. And now they're eating a lot of plant toxins, and they're not eating the meat, and this builds up over time. They start getting autoimmunity. That's such a common thing I see in former plant-based eaters, is serious autoimmune issues as well.
All right, probably same answer, but worst plant for your gut.
Oh, definitely the lectins. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, those suckers are really bad for your gut. They cause leaky gut, which is associated with over 100 different autoimmune issues and all sorts of problems. And the other thing too is the Trojan horse that gets in here are the agrochemical compounds like the glyphosates and things like that are on the plants and get in your body and cause absolute hell in your body and your gut. Glyphosate can damage your gut and kills your microbiome. It's an antibiotic. It kills the soil biome. It kills your microbiome, and it can damage your gut and cause leaky gut as well. Get in your body and is strongly associated with autoimmunity, whether it's binding to your organs and damaging them. Your body's making an immune response towards that as well, like it does with lectins, or like it likely does with lectins. Don't know, but either way, there's a strong association there.
All right. You have no meat, fish, eggs, anything available. If you had to eat one plant for survival, what would it be and why?
Well, I mean, am I on my own, or is there someone?
You're on a deserted island. There's no
chop off their leg or something like that. No. Well, it would obviously depend on what's there, but certain fruits are less toxic.
Okay.
Many fruit will still kill you. If you go out in the woods and you see random fruit or random berry, it is not safe to eat those things. They can kill you. So most of these things have evolved with other animals that are not you to propagate their seed and things like that. But they can be very toxic to other animals that eat them. So those sorts of fruits, especially some ones that have a bit of sweetness to it, those typically have a lower toxic load for us. But things like grapes will still kill cats and dogs, for instance, because of the tannins and things like that in there. So those sorts of things. But anything that I would eat, I would always do it in the traditional ways that our ancestors have eaten these things: fermenting them, cooking them, peeling them, taking the skin off, taking the seeds out, boiling the hell out of the pulp like we used to do with tomatoes. That's what's traditional tomato sauce. Make sure they're vine ripened, those sorts of things. If it is a fruit, those sorts of things. So anything that I would eat, it would be in that traditional way. There's a great book by a friend of mine, Dr. Bill Schindler. He's a paleoanthropologist and archaeologist, and he wrote a book called Eat Like a Human. And it talks about, okay, first of all, we're all eating meat, but in the last 10,000 years, we started eating more plant foods because we had to, because the megafauna died out, either because we hunted them out, or was, as I think, there was some sort of mass extinction event, like a sort of a asteroid or something like that, because all the megafauna died on every continent at the same time. So that's probably not everyone just hunting them out of extinction at the same time. Probably not. We're probably well on our way, but it happened too quickly, in my opinion. So either way, we ran out of those things, and so people had to start turning to more plant foods in certain areas, right? And so he goes through in this book all the different sorts of ways that people started doing that to ferment and change and cook and this and that to lower the toxic load of these specific plants and then increase the bioavailability, make them more nutritious. Because that's another thing too. You can't just eat something and call it good. We're not like we're not just like a combustion engine. Anything that burns is okay, right? It's like a steam locomotive. It's we need specific nutrients, So so whatever I would eat, it would be in that traditional way of trying to, as much as I could, fermenting these things, etc. That's what I would eat, and I would work very hard to make a fishing pole after that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, great answer. One last question in that same category. All right, your go-to cut of meat, if you could only eat one forever, what is your favorite?
I mostly eat ribeye already right now.
Like,
so
it's your
that's
birthday every day, right? I remember you saying
That's it. Yeah. Well, that was my birthday. Yeah. On my birthdays, I always got, the meal that you want, and all I wanted was some big steak, and I wanted as much steak as I could eat, because normally we have, 7 people in my family, 5 kids and my parents. Meat we all wanted the meat. And so you just had to have your fair share, and then you had to fill up with the rest of the stuff.
Right.
But I just on my birthday, I just want to eat as much meat as I want to until I'm done. And so that's what I did. And it was always steaks. And now I just do that every day. And so it just feels like my birthday every day.
And how do you like your meat? Do you like it rare, raw in the middle, like black and blue, or do you like it medium rare? How does Dr.
Pretty much.
Chaffee
I often go for more blue these days. So I like it more rare, but seared on the outside, nice and crunchy and crispy on the outside. I age my steaks as well, so they brown really well. So you get this nice crispy bubbly crust, and then the inside can be fairly
How long do you age
rare.
it do you put it in the refrigerator, put it with salt? I know you don't do salt that much anymore,
Yeah.
but how long do you
Pretty
age a
rarely.
steak in the refrigerator?
So I don't do like a whole loin. I won't age. So I'll wet age the loin like in the vacuum seal pack. But then when I open it up, I cut it up into steaks, put it on drying rack. It increases the surface area, so it dries out faster. And that's sort of the main thing that you're trying to dry it. You're actually not, in this case, I'm not trying to cultivate bacteria or fungus that will help break down the meat that have to be cut away and thrown away and things like that. What I want to do is I want to dry it out, and so that helps concentrate the flavor, and it helps it brown a lot better.
How long do you dry a regular, say, ribeye steak? 12 hours?
Because you at least overnight. So you at least want to do it overnight in the fridge. And if you salt it, that's when you salt it, because the salt can actually soak through it, and it sort of is quite nice. It salts it all the way through evenly. But at least overnight. Just doing that overnight, it completely changes the flavor. That doing that with chicken or fish just overnight really improves the flavor as well. But you have to have it on a drying rack, like a metal rack, not touching anything else. It has to have air circulating around all sides, because otherwise it'll build, it'll trap moisture, and that's where bacteria can hide. So if it's drying, it won't grow mold. Cannot, right? Because mold can't grow without water. So as long as it's not touching anything, you'll be fine. It'll just turn into, beef jerky at the end of it. So that's good too. That's not a big deal. So when I cut up really big, thick steaks. So I just want one of these big things per day. I don't want to have to cook up 5 steaks. There's one 3-inch thick steak.
Ooh.
Those sort of like 3-inch thick steaks, I found that the really ideal point for both flavor and texture, so it doesn't dry out too much, but it gets really good flavor, it's about 5 to 7 days. And I've sort of, as I've been doing this more and more, I sort of been like any older than that. I mean,
Right.
even like, a week, 2 weeks old. I
Gosh.
had one that was in there for like 3-4 weeks. It looked like just a
Yeah,
hoof. The
jerky.
animal was just this black thing. Yeah. But I cooked it up and it
You
was
still
still
very
red
good.
in the middle. It just sort of had the moisture level of like a ahi tuna, like
Okay.
like a ahi, like a seared ahi, and it was amazing. The flavor was incredible, and the outside was just all crunchy. It was like this crust. So I actually really like that. But that gets a bit much. Some of it's a bit dry and it's not as good. But the flavor was amazing. But I'd say 5 to 7 days has been my sweet spot.
All right. And do you do eggs?
Yeah, sometimes I just find that I need like 15 of these damn things. So I
Yeah.
just like cracking eggs and just it takes forever. It's easier just to throw on a steak. But yeah, no, eggs are great.
All right,
I
great.
consider them honorary meat. It's all the nutrients that you need to turn into an animal, and
Right.
so it's
So
great.
mostly me. This has been fantastic. I could talk for 3 hours with you. I could talk
Mhm.
10 hours with you. You're just amazing. You pack so much information in such a small amount. And I listen to you every day. And I want to thank you for
Oh,
taking the
thanks.
time to meet with me. My audience, I want them to come over. I want them to see your channel. I want to find Dr. Anthony Chaffee and listen to all your amazing interviews. Where can they find you?
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. My main channel is my YouTube channel. It's just Anthony Chaffee, MD. And so that's Chaffee spelled CHAFFE.
Mhm.
And so that's where most of my videos are. I also have a podcast called The Plant Free MD. You can get the audio tracks for all of these. It's a bit easier to navigate on the podcast because it doesn't have all the other, because I'll make like shorts and clips that are
Right.
sort of 10, 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long, sort of getting certain points out. That might be out of a 2 hour, 3 hour interview. Maybe not all of them are that long, but some of them people are like, I don't have that much time,
Right.
so I have the shorter ones too. And I have playlists on there, people looking for specific things on the YouTube channel. So like getting started on a carnivore diet or autoimmunity or
Perfect.
athletics,
Perfect.
those sort of cancer, those sorts of things. So I've sort of curated a couple of those lists people can take a look at. And then I have Instagram, just Anthony Chaffee, MD. I have Twitter, Anthony_Chaffee. There's some other ones too, but those are the main ones.
All right. If you could stay on
Oh,
after I end the recording, I want to
yeah.
give you a proper goodbye. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for this
Yeah.
interview. And maybe I'll
Yeah.
get to do you again. That would be
Yeah,
wonderful.
definitely. I was going to say too, I just forgot. I just started up a website. So I have a lot of resources. I even have a lot of studies and literature. You can sort of
Oh,
look up like
perfect.
this thing. It'll pop up videos, but also pop up studies and things like
Studies.
that people can look at. So it's just DrAnthonyChaffee.com. And you can, and that'll link to all my social media too.
Excellent. Perfect. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.